question. With regard to Israel's burgeoning relations with countries to its east, it's a subject in which I have a particular interest and indeed some involvement behind the scenes, so to speak, insofar as one can. I would particularly draw our attention to the burgeoning relationship with the Republic of India, which exists in a similar way to our relations with the United States, at least at their best, and I think also even down to today, on a multitude of levels. And this is what makes it so promising, in my estimation. It's not only about defense industries, though it's also about defense industries. It's not only about high-tech, but it's also about high-tech. It's not only about the fact that each of us exist on the edge, the different edges of the Muslim world, but it's also about that. So there's a multitude of different reasons why Israel and India are finding the basis for a very, very flourishing relationship today. And I think the relationship with India is going to be a strategic one in the period ahead. I wish to complicate the issue by reminding us all that, contrary to what many Israelis believe, you can't have a strategic relationship both with India and with China. We kind of think we can, because we just think we can do everything we want, always, all the time. But it ain't so. And at a certain point, we'll have to choose between India and China. I think we'll choose India, and I think we'll be right to do so. This is with regard to India. With regard to Azerbaijan, again, we have a very close relationship with the Azeris. You're absolutely right, based on good and solid economic foundations. It's a fascinating thing. The Azeris, after all, a majority Shia country, and nevertheless one which wishes to have a very close relationship with Israel. Looking closer to home, I share your interest in the issue of the Kurds. I want to note that relations with the Kurdish regional government in Erbil, the government of Masoud Barzani, are very extensive indeed. It all takes place behind the scenes, but visits up to and including ministerial level take place, on both sides. Israelis going to Erbil, and the Kurds coming to Jerusalem, to Beersheba, to Tel Aviv, to wherever. So that's, again, a long-standing alliance, very, very promising indeed, which I think is already bearing fruit and will continue to do so. In a broader sense then, what I think we can see from these patterns is that we're discovering that there are a great many nations with which we have a great deal in common. It's not only about the possession of common enemies, it's also about that. But I think on a deeper level, it's also about, in the case of the Middle East, it's about being ancient and minority cultures in the region. Cultures more ancient, actually, than that of the Arabs and Islam, which came out of the Hijaz, of course, and conquered 1,000 years ago. These are our culture, that of the Kurds, and others too, are older cultures from that part of the world. And I think this is something which links us in a quite profound way, and I have great hopes about this moving on ahead into the future. We shouldn't forget also that in Europe we have many firm friends, largely in Europe east of the River Rhine, and we should note our relationship, very close relationship with the Czech Republic and with Poland, and we should remember that even those countries with which we have a very difficult historic accounting in some ways, are ones which today are among our staunchest allies. And of course, when we look to the Anglosphere, to the English-speaking world, we find that to a certain extent, fascinatingly, our current relations with the United States, that most senior and strongest of the Anglosphere countries, is something of an anomaly, in the sense when we look at our very close relations with Australia and our very close relations with Canada. We note that actually the blip, or I sincerely hope it is a blip, of our current cool relations with the US will be nothing more than a blip when we look back at it. My view with regard to global strategy moving ahead is not that the United States, I may be wrong on this, but I think I'm not, is not in a state of terminal decline. It's never going to be 1990 again. There's never going to be just one superpower. But that doesn't mean to say that the United States is set to become a second or third tier power. The United States is going to be on the top table of powers. It's going to have to share the table with the Chinese, perhaps with others, but it will be there. It will be there, and it will be our natural strategic ally, not just today, but also decades hence. How do we rebuild the relationship? The relationship has not been entirely destroyed, but how do we get it back to where it was? Ultimately, I think it's a question of leadership and of will. And I'll be frank about this. I don't think that what's happened vis-a-vis America in the Middle East is a result of structural realities or economic necessities. It's a result of an American administration which chose to take a particular disengaged, so to speak, approach to the Middle East. and as a consequence a contemptuous, sometimes or at least indifferent attitude towards allies, of whom we are one, but we're not the only ones to have felt that. The Gulfies felt it too, the Egyptians felt it too. And when there is a new team at the top, then I think the situation will be very, very different. Let me just say on this that when I look at my own area of closest professional interest, Iraq and Syria, it's fascinating to note that even with the current administration, weak as it is in so many ways, you know, when the United States Air Force wants to get involved in something, when the American military power just lifts the smallest fingernail of its little finger in Erbil and in Kobani, it has the capability within 48 hours to completely reverse the military situation. That's the strength, the physical strength that the United States still has. What it needs is a corresponding moral and intellectual strength at its summit, so to speak, and I very much hope that it will soon return to possession of that.